Well, welcome to season 2 of Pillow Talk. Blessings, blessings. We're so glad to be here. We've got so much feedback, and so many people have been asking when we were coming back. We need more Pillow Talk, and so tonight we are here. Yes, welcome. Please share as you come on. Please share the broadcast. Let others know that we're on, whether you're married, you're unmarried, you're engaged, you're wanting to be married, whatever the situation is. This Pillow Talk is certainly for you. You can certainly gain some great wisdom and knowledge from us, and then others that will take part in this as well. So God bless you guys, and thank you again for coming on to season 2 of Pillow Talk.
Yep.
So absolutely. Again, we were excited. This is our first session for season 2, and we've got some great topics. Many of you have reached out to us and shared some things that were on your heart and things that you want to learn more about, things that we should perhaps even talk about or discuss that will really be a blessing to you as well as others. So we thank you all so much for your feedback. And so we're really excited to share with you guys, the things that, we've gone through, and we pray that will help you, and then other couples as well that we know, gaining the wisdom from them as well. And it's going to be an amazing season. We're probably going to do about 7 or 8 different sessions, but I tell you, it's going to be amazing. We're going to go deeper. We're really going to cover some things that are on your heart as well. Things, again, that we faced, that we've dealt with, that we've had to overcome, that we've walked through ourselves personally, and even people that we know, just experiences and, things that we've seen in marriages. So we're here because we believe in marriages. We believe that God has instituted marriage, and it's very important, and we understand how the enemy is fighting with everything that he can, especially in the church throughout the world, really coming against covenant, coming against marriages. And the statistics, many of you know the statistics of marriages, and they say 50% or more end in divorce. And so we're here tonight because we want to really annihilate those statistics. We want to decrease that. We want people to really come together. And I remember when it was prophesied to us early in our marriage that God would use us to really deal with marriages and issues in marriage. And so thank you guys so much for being here and for being a part of what God has called us to do in reference to marriages and families.
No, we don't do the pillows. As do we do the pillows. So yeah, some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, again, the things, as my wife said, that people asked about. And let me tell you how Pillow Talk really started. Now, again, it's when you talk about different things, I think you have to have a catalyst for why you do certain things that you do.
Right.
And we pastor a church, and we do ministry. We've been to probably 60-something cities in the United States, and probably about 15 different countries. And as we go, we meet a lot of people. We meet a lot of, we have a lot of relationships with people literally around the globe. And so as a result, you get a lot of questions. You get a lot of thought processes. You get a lot of things. And then we've been doing this, It's My Suddenly season, and Sudden Breakthrough, our new book. And so as a result, what happened was there were situations that we found that became a common theme. And one of those were, finances. Another one was health conditions. But we found a lot of people with relational issues and marital issues and issues that they really wanted to break through in. And so as a result, it was a combination of that and the fact that when we, probably a couple of years ago, we went through a kind of a transitional period in our ministry. And as a result, I realized that there is oftentimes a lot of conversation that happens on the pillow at night between husbands and wives that dictates their their relationship with church, relationship with God, relationship with other people. And some of these pillow talks aren't always necessarily healthy. And so we decided to look at some of those things and look at some of the results of some of the pillow talks that we had seen. And as a result from that, we developed this whole thought process of pillow talk. And so there are many of you again that really have been blessed by it, and it's really impacted some of you. Yes. And so we're always excited, and we thank you for even just being able to hear your feedback. I think that's huge as well, the feedback and those kind of things. So it really, really means a lot to hear your feedback and hear your thought process about it. At any rate, I was going to go into, so I want to make sure that Facebook is still on. I know Periscope is on, but it looks like Facebook is still on. Okay, good. Okay, so let me look at some of the thoughts that we had as a result of some of the questions. We talked about communication. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that we've run into is silent treatment okay from your spouse? And we're going to answer that question tonight. Do you value my voice? And sometimes in relationships, it can get to a point where one spouse or the other's voice we become insensitive to our spouse's voice.
Right.
Or we become intolerant to it, or we become, sometimes you can almost become hostile. I've seen it where, one spouse becomes hostile to the other person's voice, and sometimes that comes as a result of feeling rejected by their spouse. Mm-hmm. So you have all those different thoughts that you have. Right. And the reality is that your voice is important, and it's necessary for your spouse to hear your voice and hear what you have to say. So then we talked about what happens when one spouse is anti-confusion, anti-drama, anti-argument, and the other spouse is rah, 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 rah. So that spouse won't let it go. The other spouse says, I don't want to argue with you. And we're going to talk about even some of our situations that happened that stem from some of these things, mm-hmm. and how we dealt with it.
Right.
And then we learned that sometimes and they say, is it what you say, or is it how you say it? Mm-hmm. And so all those things can make a difference.
Yes.
Is it do you have the right to be heard, or do you want to have the right to be on one accord?
Right.
And so one of the things we said was, I asked the question when we did this, what would really happen if marriages got on one accord? Mm-hmm. Again, what could you really accomplish? And so when we look at that question of what can we really accomplish, then we're going to have to look at how do we mesh, how do we work together, how do we accomplish things, how do we make things really happen? Mm-hmm. And I was watching one day, and one day we had a couple that we were dealing with, and as a result, this couple, you could tell that the wife was torn in one direction, the husband was going in another direction, and then they were frustrated because finances weren't together, so many things weren't going in the right direction. Mm-hmm. But the reality is they had so much that they could accomplish and so much that they could do if they worked together.
Right.
But of course, the enemy always wants to have you at odds with one another. Why? Because he doesn't want you to work together to accomplish what you could accomplish if you really came together on one accord.
Absolutely. And I think, it's a biblical principle, the power of unity. And even with God creating the woman out of the man, that means that there is something that is inside of her that he needs. There's something inside of him that she needs. And so when we begin to look at that, when we begin to look at what God instituted and how he brought things together. But again, even as my husband said, if the enemy can keep you at odds, if he can keep you going in different directions, if he can get you looking more outside of your marriage for solutions, for peace, for all of these things, then marriage is of no good. It's of no value. And so we're getting back to the place of what marriage really means. And, many times, of course, you come together and, you're different people, right? You're different people. And so how do you work together? How does this really work? And sometimes you've been married for an extended period of time, and some people are like, and I'm still trying to walk through this whole process. And so we're here to to really pray with you, to really strengthen you, to really encourage you, to let you know you're not alone. We deal with things ourselves, and how do we overcome those issues and those situations? You know, as many of you know, if not all of you know, we met and 2 months later we got married. So we didn't know each other. We hadn't dated for, you know, I didn't know all of his qualms, and he didn't know all of mine. I didn't know all of his likes, and he didn't know all of my dislikes. And so it was a process. It was a process, and you know, God really had us on a, you know, it was a time of acceleration in a sense, because it happened so fast. And so we really had to get ourselves together, because we knew that God was bringing us together, not just to say a marriage, but he was merging two ministries together. And so we had to quickly figure out what that looked like.
The next thing I was going to tell you guys to do, if you would please share. I see some of our family, Michelle J. Miller, and of course her, Miller Boston. That's right, because she is married to Mr. Boston.
Yes.
And we had the pleasure and honor of doing that marriage last month, so that was tremendously amazing. And it was a suddenly marriage, Marcus and Michelle.
Kingdom.
Another thing I'm gonna ask this question: is your spouse selfish? And we talked about that as another thing that people talked about is your spouse selfish?
Selfish.
Does your spouse, are they sexually selfish? Are they financially selfish? Are they emotionally selfish? And you gotta always go back and really, you gotta think about that. Ask yourself the question: am I being selfish about my spouse? Am I only concerned about my needs being met, or am I concerned about my spouse's needs being met? And one thing we said in Pillow Talk Season 1 is, do not marry a person who is selfish.
Yes.
You cannot marry a person that's selfish. If you marry a person that's selfish, your needs will always go lacking, and their needs will always be met, and you'll always be frustrated, and you'll always be saying, you'll always have, you'll be telling yourself, listen, I got to die to self. I got to die to self. I got to die to self. But there comes a point when the relationship should be mutually beneficial.
Right.
We should have some type of thing going on in our relationship where we both get the benefit of the enjoyment of the relationship. Again, whether it's financially, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, sexually, all of these things, you got to have the mutual benefit in the relationship, because if not, you could be really frustrated. Amen.
Absolutely.
And somebody said that they were saying that to themselves now. My spouse is selfish. And that's a tough place to be, especially when you're in the church and you want to please God. And so here it is, you want to please God, you want to be married, you want to try to make things work, but your spouse is selfish. So we're going to deal with that tonight and just look at some of those thought processes. Let's go back up and let's deal with the first couple of things. I don't know how far we're going to get tonight. We're also going to talk about temperaments, about, like, for instance, I have an apostolic temperament. And then there's also a part of me that has a pastoral dimension and a pastoral temperament, because we're in ministry. Then my wife has a prophetic temperament. And so I said we're going to do a series called Married to the Prophet, because prophets have a whole different type thought process. Sometimes they're really black and white, and they can be very, they're very wonderful person, very sweet people, but you got to understand the temperament of a prophet. And then the prophet has to understand the temperament of the apostolic grace.
Right.
And then you got to understand the temperament of the pastoral grace. All of these different temperaments are different. And what if you're not even in ministry? What if you're just a business person? Or what if your personality type, you have different personality types. Even you have different love languages. So how does all that process work as it pertains to us being different, us having different processes, different things like that? All of that stuff makes a difference. Yep. So we're going to look at it. Somebody said, mine was selfish. Now she is my ex.
Okay.
Wow. That's pretty intense,
Yeah, because, in that you realize that, does this person really care about my well-being? Are they concerned about how I feel, about the things that I like, the things that I want or desire? And so it really becomes a challenge. It really, really becomes a challenge. And you begin to think, oh my God, am I in this marriage by myself? Because it seems like I have to do everything by myself. I have to, cook, not necessarily just cook for yourself, but just be concerned about, just the activities of daily living, things that, really concern of marriage and coming together, working together, me helping you and making sure your clothes are okay, making sure you have something to eat. These are the type things that I'm concerned about. I'm always, concerned about, okay, honey, what would you like to eat? And so my husband is one, he's just like, I don't mind, whatever, those type things don't bother him. Sometimes I want a reaction. I just want him to say, oh, I want this. But, being concerned about him. Even there are times I may be tired, but I'm still concerned. Baby, are you hungry? Do you want anything? Do you need anything? And so we have to be concerned more about others than just ourselves.
One of the things that's me. I'm really not a picky person. The only thing I'm ever concerned about, most of y'all that know me know the only thing I'm ever concerned about is being on time.
Yes.
As long as we're on time and as long as we pay tithe, I'm all right. I'm good other than that. You can pretty much do what you want to do. I don't have a problem. We can eat what you want to eat. I'll find something to eat. I'm not picky. We can wear whatever you want to wear. I'm just not picky about this kind of stuff. So at any rate, but let's talk about this. The first thing I want to talk about is in communication in the relationship. Is the silent treatment okay? Is it okay to have silent treatment? And is it okay? Okay, for instance, what if your spouse, we talked about it, what if you're the anti-confusion, anti-drama type person like my wife is? And what if your spouse is the person that's vocal? So she is introverted. She's a classic introvert. I am extroverted. And so because I'm extroverted, I like to communicate. I like to verbalize what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I'm going through. My wife, on the other hand, is an introvert. So tell us how introverts operate.
I usually process things inside. I'm not as vocal. I think mostly before I speak. So I'm thinking in my mind, okay, what I say, how is it going to affect the other person? What may be their reaction to what I've said? So I've already processed this whole thing in my mind, and sometimes I'll even answer the question in my mind, but I have not communicated the answer to what is being said. And so I think and I'm processing. So I'm the processor. I'm thinking, okay, what the other person has said. So I'm thinking about that. I'm processing, why they said what they said, what, kind of reaction do they want, what are they looking for. So I go through this whole thing, but it's just internally. So that's kind of my personality. And so one of the things that I've had to learn, and I'm still learning how to effectively communicate, with my husband, with other people. I'm not one that's on the phone all the time. I'm very seldom on the phone, but at the same time, I feel like I'm a great listener, because I'm not going to interrupt you when you're talking. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to be very attentive to you, and so I may I'll respond at the appropriate time. But for the most part, I'm a great listener, and so I'm eager to hear what you have to say with not much input.
Now somebody and somebody asked two questions. I'm going to answer those two questions. One question somebody asked was, is an introvert okay, somebody says silent treatment can be perceived as being a passive aggressive and a tool of punishment. And then somebody else said, is that a way of manipulation and control? Mm-hmm. And so for some people it can be. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes when you have because what we had to learn was, number one, even in a leadership. Now my wife went back to school. She has an undergraduate in leadership, minor in public administration from University of South Florida, and then an MBA in organizational leadership. And so when she had to learn it, even though she's an introvert, she can't lead the organization from being an introvert.
Right.
So we also had to learn, you can't be in a relationship and only communicate with yourself. Mm-hmm. It's not fair. Because what if your spouse's love language is communication, which mine is. So mine is communication, hers is touch. And so if you starve your spouse of their love language, then that is a form of manipulation and control.
Right.
And it's not fair, even if you don't like to argue, even if you don't like to fight and fuss and complain, there is a way to be able to communicate without having to fuss, fight, and complain. And it's not even in what you say, it's how you say it.
Right.
So we've got to learn how to, my love language is communication, it is abuse in the relationship if she doesn't communicate with me at all when I'm saying, hey, baby, I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. And then now it's, again, I can't say it in a very demeaning manner or a very angry manner, or my tone is off. But if she's communicating with me, or if I'm communicating with her and she says nothing at all, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because that's just as much abusive as a spouse. No communication is verbal abuse, just like it is if a spouse is saying curse words or being angry or mean. It's still a form of verbal abuse because you're withholding the affection. We've got a puppy. Probably pretty soon he's gonna come up and he's gonna hop into bed and wave at y'all with one arm. And but if PETA will come and get you if you don't feed him. If we have animals and we don't feed them, we withhold things from them that they need, then that's a form of abuse.
Right.
And so it's the same way in a relationship. If you don't communicate with your spouse and give them back what they need, it's just as much abuse as the person withholding affection and withholding. If she likes to touch, then if I'm withholding that, that's just as much abuse as anything else that goes on in a relationship.
Absolutely. And so especially if it's an environment where the other spouse wants you to respond, and it's a safe environment for you to respond. It's not like if you're going to respond and they're going to just jump all over you. But if it's a safe place for you to respond, you should respond. And again, it is a form of manipulation. It is a form of control, and it is selfishness. Because it's like, I'm not going to please you. I'm only going to please myself. And by not talking, or I'm going to do this against you, and I'm not going to communicate with you. So these things we have to begin to look at and say, wow, begin to examine ourselves, because sometimes we may not even see it that way. And one of the things that is so important that the people that are Christian, they say, okay, I'm a follower of Christ. I want to love the way Christ loved. I want to do what Christ did. So I follow him. But at the same time, when we begin to self-examine ourselves, we begin to look at, okay, maybe I'm falling short in that area. I didn't really see it that way. I didn't see it was a form of manipulation. I didn't see it was really selfishness. So this is what I'm walking in. And so as we begin to look at that, begin to look at not at the other person, but we begin to look at ourselves. We begin to see things perhaps from a different perspective.
Amen. Well, you guys take a moment and share. Those who've not shared, thank you for those who did share. But we'd really appreciate if you to share. I know this is the first time we're back on, so we're getting our numbers back up so that people can be blessed. But and then some people may not even know that we're on because this is the first episode. It's been so long since we're coming. And but anyway, then the question becomes, not only is the silent treatment okay, but do you value my voice? Do you value what I have to say? Because sometimes the issue with the spouse is not the fact that the spouse doesn't just want to give you the silent treatment. Sometimes they can feel like their voice is not valued. And that's just as dangerous as, because you're expecting me, like sometimes, one of the things my wife said to me one time is that I'm not gonna answer you because of the fact that you don't really want to hear what I have to say. You're just looking for something else to argue about. Now let because this is an environment where we want to really be real with things that really happen in relationships. And so the other thing was, she had gone through so much abuse in other relationships. In her home. She talked about it when she was growing up, and then even when in a previous relationship. So with that in mind, it made it difficult when we came into the relationship that if there were times when she didn't feel like her voice was valuable, or that what she was saying, if she had her input was valuable to me, then she's like, well, I'm not going to really say anything because it's not really going to matter. It's not going to make a difference. Nobody really cares anyway. So then that causes your spouse to shut down. And so not only is it important that you communicate with your spouse, it's also important that you hear what your spouse has to say, that you value what they have to say, and that you hear them, and that you at least consider it. Now, there are times, whether it's we work together, we do business together, we do ministry together, we pastor together. So there are going to be times she's going to suggest something, and I may not necessarily implement what she asked me to implement immediately.
Right.
But at the same time, it's also valuable that she knows that I've heard what she has to say, and and that she feels that what she had to say was valuable.
Right.
And then as a result, even if I don't implement it then, I say, okay, how can we implement it? And then you may have to ask the question, is that something we need to do today? Is that something we need to do tomorrow? Is that something we need to do a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now? What do you think is the priority level of what you wanted, the suggestion that you brought up?
You know, and one of the things too, even, you know, with the Word of God, as God has said, well, the Word of God says in Ephesians 5, just that whole process of how that works with husbands and wives, and what is expected from a husband, what is expected from a wife. And many times, wives, our discernment may be a little bit more. I'll put it that way. We may have more discernment in a particular area, or there's something that's pressed upon our heart and we feel like, wow, this will work. This will probably be better. And so one of the things that is important, even in those times when your spouse may not hear you, or they may not receive the information that you're trying to give to them. And so one of the things that you have to be okay with is knowing that it's okay. And so whether they're wrong for not listening or whatever, or you're wrong, then we have to allow God to bring that, so as we look at it, it's like, okay, God, how are you going to get the glory out of this? I've given him what I think that he needs, or the wisdom or the knowledge that I think that is important, and it seemed like he didn't hear me. It seems like he did just the opposite. And so you got to know, as the wife, as being submitted, there's that word, as being submitted.
Can you say the word again? It's an S word. Can you give me the S word again?
Yes. So, as being submitted, what I really believe that is saying is, you submit. When you're submitting unto your husband, you're submitting unto God. And so then God, when we're silent in that respect, because many times we, as women, we're like, you didn't do this and you didn't do that, and la 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 la. Many times we're speaking so loud that they can't hear God. And so we have to create an environment, and then, they may do just whatever they said they were going to do, and it didn't work out. Well, it's okay. It's okay, because as the head, they have more the responsibility. We were talking about this not just the other day, when Eve bit from the forbidden fruit, it was nothing. But when Adam did it, then everything else was revealed. Everything else was open. So the man and the husband has a greater responsibility and of being that which God has put in place and has instituted in marriage to be the head, to take responsibility, and all of these things. So it's important that we have to allow them to be that. And again, nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes. We all sometimes don't make, seemingly the right choice, but, hopefully they learn what to do and what not to do next time.
And being transparent on that, there have been times when I didn't listen to something my wife had to say. So let me give you a couple instances. And I think you got to be able to do both. I think you have to be able to hear what your spouse has to say. I know that God has given me a spouse who can hear him. And there are times when, she hears from God. And so as a result of her hearing from God, it causes me, I've learned how to be able to discern and listen. And then here's the other thing. Men, you also have to be able to discern if it's your wife's flesh talking or if it's her spirit talking.
Right.
Let me give you the difference. When her spirit was talking, there were some times when she said, she gave me warning about something that was going on in ministry. And so she has a guarding anointing, shamar anointing, which means to guard. It's a Hebrew word which means to guard, preserve, protect. And so she has a heart to do that. But that's what the rib does for the heart. It does it for the lungs. It does it for the vital organs. It actually protects.
Yes.
And so she has that function in my life. So if I listened to her on 2 different occasions, our ministry would not have suffered some of the hits that it suffered. Matter of fact, 3 occasions, probably a couple